on this lovely Sunday morning, cool and fresh, bright, sun and clouds both there, doing their thing. I thought it would be nice to have a talk on happiness, pursuit of happiness, or somebody let me have is it the most recent tricycle or one of the most recent, where you see a bunch of Tibetans coming down a roller coaster, arms up in the air. I think you're told that when you go into the roller coaster, that's what you should be doing. Screaming and having your arms up seems to be sort of a universal expression or agreed upon expression of excitation or ecstasy. I also saw within the last few days a tape somebody had lent me on the last days of Osho or Bhagwan in Pune, and the people all dressed in white. This is the particular garb in Pune of the particular following of the Rajneesh, or Osho, how they call him, and the musical accompaniment to his meditation, which is walking silently on a small platform, his hands like this, and the people, as the music rises and falls, have their arms up and singing in all kinds of pitches, Osho, Osho, and conveying maybe to some people the mode of happiness, ecstasy, peak experience, or whatever all you want to call this, and what we seek for ourselves. Do we? This is the question. What is it that we're really seeking when we say we are in the pursuit of happiness, which I think is written in some kind of American valuable paper? Constitution or something, is it? The Constitution, pursuit of Declaration. That's what we're created for, or that's why we should have a government, a good government that helps people in their pursuit of happiness. And either we are just indoctrinated with the quote-unquote fact that we are happy, or that we're on the road to it, or that we will find it sooner or later. But you can also be indoctrinated to believe that you are happy. And we have so little indoctrination, good thing, that we could question some things, that nothing is established, or some people say cast or carved in stone, that we are happy, or that we're even in the pursuit of happiness. We don't even know very often what happiness is. What is it? And if we agree that we are pursuing it, that we would like to be happy, what is it that we would like to be? Can that be a real deep question, not just accepting it as some words that have been accepted for a long time and we've never really questioned what they mean? Because we're often told, aren't you happy, or you're happy now? On the TV shows that I watched with my son when he was little, the Captain Kangaroo, if you remember him, would always say, well, are you happy now? Or isn't this wonderful? Are you happy? Isn't this happiness? And I just couldn't understand how somebody could be so insistent rather than wondering. And Ralph, our son, at that time, he was Ralph, now he's Remo. He didn't like that show. He switched over to Rocket Ship 7, where the guy was wearing a uniform of the rocket ship. And it seemed to be, of course he didn't know how to express it, but it was less hypocritical that we are all very happy. It didn't talk about that from the outside. And I think this would be good for us not to think or talk about it from the outside, but question inwardly, what is it that is happiness? What would we like to have or be? Or when has it really happened in our life? Or does the word happen have to do with happiness? I never thought of that. Something happened. There's the same kind of trunk in there of a word. I have to investigate that. Something happening, not planned. Is that the same root as happiness? That would be nice to find out, word-wise. So to me, this morning when I began to think about it a little bit and then abstaining from thinking too much about it, because I've had the experience in the past that if I think about something that I will talk about, then it doesn't come in the talk. Somehow the brain seems to have thought about it and then put it into the files. And it doesn't come because it's already been thought about and finished. So I'm very careful these days not to think too much about what I'm going to talk on, what the topic will be. The topic, yes, it need to have a topic, or else the mind is dangerously blank, at least dangerously for a talk. It happened to me recently in a retreat. The mind was blank, which is wonderful when you're sitting, but it's not so good when you're sitting here about to give or supposed to give a talk and everybody expecting one. Although people assured me it was fine, just not to know what you're doing and to be together in this state of not knowing and not to be anxious about that. It's the anxiety about the blank mind and the not knowing that is the problem, not the state. The state is simply creative, open, I don't know yet, and not drawn together or, in anxiety. This is a tension, a stress. Oh, I don't know what to say. Will it come? What will they think? This is not the openness of not knowing, which is the womb of creativity, out of which come fresh insights, fresh ideas, or call it what you will. Insight is the best, maybe. So, still, while sitting there in the chair, the mind wandered and wondered. What is this happiness? And it has a hard time focusing when a direct question like this is asked. And what I find it does usually is go into the past. When do I remember having been happy? It did that automatically or spontaneously, going to the past. And it must have been, judging from that there were really happy moments in my childhood. In spite of all the stuff that happened in Germany, in the family, there were these utterly happy moments. Right now what comes to mind visually as a little projected image from a slideshow is a sunny day like this and being allowed to wear these socks. They're called ankle socks in German. And there were very few days on which we were allowed to wear those. You can't imagine this here, how many prohibitions there are, and at least there were in my family, and what you can wear and what you're not supposed to wear, because it's not the time of the year yet. Not so much the temperature, but the time of year on which you don't wear ankle socks. And to me, this was a blessing, a bliss, to be allowed to wear those and sandal-like shoes. Can't describe it, although each one of you may have had some favorite piece of clothing that you were, that made this body happy. What was it? What was that happiness? It was just like a real glow casting out of this body. Probably thinking how nice I looked, but also the feeling maybe more of the skin of the leg got air, sunshine. I can't analyze it now, but I do remember this amazing feeling of bliss of wearing these little socks. And of course, maybe a skirt with a blouse with short sleeves. I don't recall having sleeveless things. Maybe it wasn't that warm. Probably was, but we didn't have those as kids. We for certainly didn't were allowed to expose as much of our skin and body as what is happening these days. That would not be right. Few years ago, when I left my sister's house to go to the airport, and my brother-in-law was driving me there, and I had a blouse on which had 3/4 sleeves, but quite a low neckline. I've seen some people here wear the same blouse. And then I had something else over it, which had a little bit less of a low neckline. And my sister looked at me. She's 2 years older, so at that time she was maybe 75 or 6. She said, "You're not going to wear this. You can't wear this." And it just struck me like lightning. What am I wearing? Is this okay? I was anything but happy at these words. Well, it was just an illustration of how regulated our attire was. And when it was a little bit less regulated, then that part of that was the happiness too, maybe. Things being allowed, not forbidden. Yeah, there was happiness connected with that, with the absence of forbiddenness. Verboten, you've heard that word probably. Sometimes people, if they don't know much German, they still know verboten. Maybe they've been in Germany and have seen it posted at certain places where you're not supposed to go or be. Forbidden. And that wasn't just the government verboten things, but families too. And you see my 76-year-old sister telling her 74-year-old sister, "You can't wear this." And it being a certain shock. So, what other times were happy? And could I, this was the question, could I sort of dress it in a more general coat or general attire? What was generally happiness producing? And to mind comes very quickly the Christmases we celebrated, even though my mother's line of family were Jewish, but she enjoyed having the Christmas tree and these Christmas tables for the kids. And my grandma the Oma from Berlin came together with her youngest son, who was mentally a little bit retarded, and she brought him along. So that was wonderful having these people who were very little with us come and visit. And of course, with my grandmother and my Oma, nothing was verboten. She was just totally permissive, but in her whole appearance and in the whole way, her smile, her facial expression, there were no lines of harshness or meanness. The eyes had strong wrinkles which were smile wrinkles, kindness wrinkles. There's one picture of her sitting in a chair near a railroad that my father and mother had built in a whole room full of landscape, and the walls were landscape, Swiss mountains, and then the trains on different levels were running through, and here she's in a chair and I'm sort of leaning against her, not smiling, but totally secure, that picture, that expression in the picture. And I could say now, even though the moment has been remembered partly because of the picture, that there was absolute happiness of freedom from worry or anxiety, which I think is happiness. Absence of anxiety or worry about the future, about the family, about war, which was always in the wings. I heard the adults whisper when we're not in the room that the guns will start. Something, expression like that. The guns will start to shoot, which was, of course, a terribly frightening thought, image to a child of how old? 10 years. What were these guns that were going to begin shooting? And of course we had heard about the First World War. Not that we had television or that we went to movies like that. We weren't allowed to. That was verboten. But if I think what kids see these days, it just makes me shudder. And wonder how these vulnerable young brains deal with that, with the horror of war movies on which there is no verboten sign, or video games. It's unfathomable to this brain how this will affect or does affect the young, vulnerable brains. I know how this brain here soaked up anxiety and must have formed endless patterns of danger, of loss, that I could lose my mother, my family, that the house could be destroyed. I prayed every night, don't let this house be destroyed by some other houses falling on it, or a big smokestack which wasn't too far in the distance, although I measured it in my mind that if it fell over, if a bomb hit it, would it hit still our house, that big smokestack? And I tried to engage people who could figure yet whether the distance between smokestack and our house would be the same as the length of that thing. To just provide myself with some feeling of security, which is not happiness. No, not at all. But when Christmas approached or my birthday approached, and these days were overlaid, or the anticipation overlaid with joy. Happiness even at the thought of Christmas coming, my Oma coming with my uncle. Siegbert was his name. And this sort of a real armistice, I could almost say, was in the house, was in our family and house. It was just not the usual thing of hassling with my brother or telling him all the things that he did wrong, that were forbidden. This peace in the family was a happiness-producing thing for me. The thought of Christmas and like a moratorium, let's not have any outbreaks of violence. Not that there was the violence in our family at all, the way I can see it here on shows, pictures, or what people report about their families. But to me, it was too much already with my brother. Much too much. So Christmas wasn't a factor. He had a Christmas table just like all of us. And his father, who was really my mother's brother, he was not my real brother. My uncle and his wife had Peter. But his wife died in childbirth, Peter's mother. So my family took him into the family. So he grew up like as though he was my brother, but not really as though, because he was not accepted as my brother. And I felt that very strongly, and that was not happiness, it was anything but an enormous, deep sadness connected with that in my memory. And yet Christmas, when he had his table and he had his toys, and we played together with his toys and my toys, and these were happy days. Everybody was nice to him. So that is a terrific factor of happiness, people being nice among each other. And I don't mean necessarily hypocritical niceness. That just goes so far. It's better than scolding and punishing. But the absence of that is already a great relief to somebody very sensitive to these things, as I was. So when I think back, there is heavy, heavy days of anxiety and pain, and yet these days of utter happiness, peacefulness, joy, and it cannot be properly described, but maybe all of you have had experiences of that sort, where you could trust that no war would break out in the family, or at that time, those Christmases I think back on, there wasn't a war yet, although at 1939 it came, 1939, which was the end of these happy Christmases. Not quite, because our family in the beginning was not drawn into war in other ways, but I can't go into that. Oh, is this a talk day or also discussion? Discussion also? Yes. Well, I'll talk a little bit more. I haven't talked very long yet. So what is happiness? Happiness is absence of strife, absence of war. No matter how much you rationalize it and create reasons for it, that it is the right thing to have and to be and to enter into. That is never convincing to me. And the people who are trying to convince others of that have either never been in one, never experienced it, or even though there was a war, they were shielded from it through special statuses or brain work, which you often see is going on for the troops. They all have elaborated and found rationalizations for the rightness of this war here in Iraq, Afghanistan. Why it is right, why it is good. And the brain is there with its activities and potential to make the body feel secure or more secure than it is in time of war. So it does gobble up and attract all kinds of theories and rationalizations, why this has to be this way and why if I contribute to it, I'm doing a good thing. Otherwise, the person would get sick, and many do. Sick mentally and physically. So one must not resent or judge badly that people buy into these rationalizations about the rightness of war. It is necessary to survive sanely, at least with a thin layer of protection. It doesn't hold very thick, and you can see now how the layer is crumbling here and there and everywhere. Not everywhere. There's still people who are working to maintain that thin layer of protection, mental protection, of the rightness of war, the rightness of sacrifice. If you really begin to look at it, it is just unbelievable what we have learned to accept, and not just past years, but millennia. You look at these old Shakespeare dramas, why it is the right thing to enter France and win over them and get the land back from another 100 years ago. To stimulate and get the troops worked up. I'm just thinking right now of the Henry V and a fantastic movie there with Branagh, and just a very short scene of his prize, a beautiful French daughter of the king. And it was amazing possibility. Still, you don't only get your land back or then some more land, but you also get a lovely wife. Even though she's of enemy birth, that doesn't matter. She is a good booty. And she, of course, looks forward to the lovely scenes in there when she learns a few English words from her nurse. Oh, it's very, very lovely. And here, these horrible war scenes where the young kids, children, with their weapons and spears and drums and mowed down in an attack. We've done this for thousands of years. Here and there somebody has begun to think about it and done a revolution, but usually there's then a counter-revolution which wins, and then again a new war is being dreamt up to undo what the revolution did. To read what has been the fate or the history of humankind is just mind-boggling. Is that why we're here? On this earth? To invent war games and peace games, enjoying both, rationalizing both, and yet there's no real inner peace. There's a lot of inner war, but inner peace there is none. Or is there? Inner happiness? Is there? Where the peace or the happiness that has been attained for a few moments or a few days can be trusted to last? That's a good question to ask oneself. Can this be trusted to last? And of course, the answer, if you look critically, intelligently, is no, of course not. Because any peace that is grounded in me and mine versus you and yours cannot last. It cannot, because the same mechanisms hold for you, and you will want to overturn it, just as much as my people do. My people want to get that land back, and so do they. So anything that is grounded or based on this simple division of me and you, mine and yours, cannot last. It's amazing if it can be attained at all for a minute, or an hour, or a day, or a year. So then the question naturally arises, if it's true that there is in us a peace-seeking element. Is there such a thing as a lasting peace that does not flip over into war again? A lasting goodness that does not flip over into badness, danger, horror, mutual killing and stressing. Is there? And is that one of the driving questions why people come to a place like this? Or is it rather just to seek for a few moments of happiness, superficial happiness, I'll call it, without saying it's good or bad? That isn't the point. But is it superficial, or is there a looking for something that is lasting? It does not have this instability of me and yours, mine and yours, which is instability, isn't it? We can see that. And keep it in mind. Test it out. Don't accept it. Test it as you live day by day, when something that was so nice has just turned or flipped over into something that is not nice, that is painful or shameful. Then ask, right then, what is it? What was this all based on? Why did I trust it? What was the foundation? You can ask it, even if you have no people to ask it with, and there are right now, if you belong to a place like this, you have circles of people who can be trusted. You will not be denounced to the secret police if you question this. Well, we have to appreciate this. That we can sit here in a circle and ask these questions without being afraid, will somebody go to the phone and call the police? This was my fear as a child. I must be very careful. And these days, even when something reminds me of that possible danger, that I may be denounced for what I say, somebody may send a bunch of videos to the White House. No, that's too ridiculous. Who would even look at it? No, they wouldn't. Or they would not understand it, probably. They would say, what did somebody just say the other day about a person here whom I said was okay to give talks, and that this person contradicts themselves. They say one thing and do another. And I'm just wondering, did that person understand what was said? Because when you do this work, the way I'm doing right now, talking, meeting, later on discussing, you open yourself up to criticism. Inevitably, there will be people who will not understand, at least in the beginning, maybe eventually, maybe tomorrow, but not necessarily right away, and also misunderstand what is being said and then charge you with putting out false information. That's why I'm careful even how we word things, when we maybe super careful when we send a newsletter. So be aware that this could be used against us. At least the Times these days with, what is it called, Patriot Acts, so are conducive to mistrust, superstition, or suspicion, paranoia. Parents may think that their children are being, falsely indoctrinated. We found that when we were on the land search for buying a place for a center, a few communities were concerned, will we indoctrinate their children? Are we a cult that is founded to indoctrinate the neighborhood? That was a concern. Not widespread, but it was at one piece of land I think we didn't get because of that. Wasn't that? Do you remember? Indoctrinating, I don't remember the location, but indoctrinating the neighbors. Oh, with all the movies that abound and espionage and stuff, it sits in your brain that these possibilities has been put there by very impressive methods, videos, pictures, DVDs. So why not this group? We don't know them. But here we are, we have this land, and I hope our city council thinks well of us. We give them a donation every year, so maybe we should give them a little bit more as the times progress. But see, where did a remark like this come from? And when I ask myself and stop for a moment and let stuff come up, my past definitely is in the mixture. The fear of denunciation. You probably don't even have that word in your daily vocabulary, do you? Do you? Denunciation. You're going to be denounced. Well, you may have some in your past. There were people spread false rumors about black people. You're not totally distant from this kind of, because when I see what happened not long ago, how people were, I don't even want to go into it right now, but the horrors of lynching and stuff is not very old in this country. And yet to be denounced is not for you is it a fear, a live fear, that somebody could denounce you for your views or so?
More, it's funny that you talked about that. Not particularly in regards to color. I was reading an article on the internet that talked about how some of the neoconservatives are utilizing things like Zen, meditation, and other things to try to reach people. Yeah. Things that you would expect would be not means that they could use. Things that kind of keep us away from being usurped by this big, whatever the forces that lead us to paranoia, use. But they'll use anything, I guess, some people. And the question for me was how paranoid should I be?
Yeah. How paranoid should I be? Yeah, yes, it's a good question. Yeah, we can go into that. Maybe I should stop here because I've said enough. Let me think, have I said enough? Where were we on how? City Council of Springwater. I don't think we have angered anybody, but we have, there was once an article written by a newspaper man about, he came here to visit and we showed him around with pride, our wonderful food and the garden and the swimming pool. And the article that he wrote about it is as though we were a spa. And the question arose, how come they are tax-free? So we had to, our lawyer Paul had to really build a case, and it was not difficult because we have plenty of evidence that we are, that we can be defined as a religious community that talks and the acceptance by religious publishers and not writers, but well accepted publishing houses and stuff, that we are okay. But we had to fight for it in a way, because we could not exist as a center if we had to pay taxes on the property. That would be financially impossible. And there is this exemption possible for religious institutions, but there are forces, as you say, that work against it, not just because of the money, but because it's not a Christian thing. I just heard it this morning on NPR, Yeah. It should be a Christian God that we pray to. But there are many, many sane people in this country and many sane organizations, and I trust in the ACLU and the other organizations that they will have the strength and intelligence to protect what is so precious in this country. Because for us, a German family that was persecuted, the idea of coming to this country, emigrating, or just being accepted here, was unbelievably blissful. Here is another happiness factor, that there is such a place where we could go, emigrate to, where we would not be persecuted, would not have to be afraid for our lives, or for being able to go to school if we wanted to. And my mother could go to public swimming pool again. I mean, little things which are taken so much for granted, but if they are used on the chopping block to take away, then it is a very, very painful thing. Not because of this particular activity of swimming, but of being isolated. Isolated as such and such a person. We had to get papers about our racial origins. Very primitive in a way from a legal point of view, but to what degree we are not Aryan, non-Aryan. And Aryan, to my surprise, when I came to the Zen Center, was a very noble expression in Buddhism. The noble Aryans, Aryan meaning, I think, noble in Sanskrit. And that word was usurped by the Nazis for putting on the Germans with their white skin and straight noses and blonde hair. Actually, my sister and I were once chosen in school for a picture of a typically Aryan face, blonde and straight nose and stuff. It is all so ridiculous. But the thought of being totally accepted again and totally free to do what you want to do, that could produce instant happiness. And of course, I haven't gone into maybe anything that is not ego-dominated, self-dominated, it can be the way to happiness, is happiness. If you're not concerned with protecting just you and your own, but you have everybody else in mind, which is wholeness, fullness, and empty of prejudice, emptiness of prejudice. So maybe we'll stop here and start a discussion or dialogue